Barry Morphew walked out of that courthouse, smiling like a man who had just won the lottery, both daughters at his side. A grin that said, "Tried it, didn't work, go home." He went on Good Morning America and told the country he had been falsely accused. He sued the state of Colorado for $15 million. He said the investigators were incompetent, the prosecutor was corrupt, and that his wife, the wife he claimed to love, the wife he said he wanted found, had been used as a weapon against him by people who had decided he was guilty before they looked at a single piece of evidence. And for a while, he had a point. The case had collapsed from the inside. The prosecutor had been disbarred. The charges had been dropped. There was no body. There was no cause of death. Barry Morphew was a free man. He stayed free for exactly as long as it took for a search team looking for a completely different missing woman to stumble across a set of bones in a remote sagebrush field in Moffat County, Colorado. What came out of those bones is the reason Barry Morphew is back in a courtroom, this time with no way to smile his way out. Barry and Suzanne grew up together in Alexandria, Indiana. High school sweethearts. They went to Purdue University together, then got married in 1994. Barry had genuine athletic talent, skilled enough as a baseball player to be drafted by the Toronto Blue Jays. An injury ended that before it started, and he went into landscaping contracting instead. Suzanne taught high school for a while, then left to raise their two daughters, Mallory and Macy, at home. The family photographs look the way family photographs usually look. Smiling faces, nice clothes, a life that works. Susan wasn't just a wife and mother. Friends described her as the kind of person who remembered birthdays, checked in on people without being asked, and always seemed to put everyone else's needs ahead of her own. She loved the outdoors, enjoyed bike rides through the Colorado mountains, and cherished the quiet moments she spent with her daughters. Cancer tested her more than once. She had survived it twice, enduring surgeries, treatments, and the uncertainty that comes with every follow-up appointment. But the people who knew her say she rarely let it define her. Even while dealing with her own health, she remained focused on her family and the people around her. Suzanne was especially close to Mallory and Macy. Friends recalled that much of her world revolved around them, their school events, milestones, and the everyday moments that parents often take for granted. On social media, she projected optimism and gratitude, often sharing family memories and celebrating life's small victories. To the outside world, Suzanne Morphew looked like someone who had fought through adversity and found happiness again. Few people realized that behind closed doors, another battle was quietly unfolding. In 2018, they relocated to Salida, Colorado, a small mountain town about 2.5 hours from Denver, sitting in a valley with beautiful views. The stated reason was to be closer to Mallory, who was attending a college nearby. The real reason, by multiple accounts from people close to the family, was that the marriage had been fracturing for years, and they were hoping a new place would do what the old place couldn't. It didn't. What was happening behind closed doors in Salida was far from a perfect family. Suzanne had started keeping a notebook, a documented record of the marriage that was growing longer every time she added to it. The list included the wedding ring Barry had allegedly melted down, the women he described as good for business on Facebook, an incident in Mexico where he grabbed her phone to go through her messages, an occasion on which he hit her hard enough to make her nose bleed, an occasion on which he shoved her into a closet, pressed a gun to his own head, and said, "Is this what you want me to do?" Barry also threatened to cut off payments for Suzanne's cancer treatment. This is a woman who had survived cancer twice and was still in ongoing oncological care. He threatened to take that away during an argument. In public, Barry Morphew was the charming, devoted husband of a small-town power couple. In Suzanne's notebook, something else entirely was being recorded, one entry at a time. Against that backdrop, Suzanne had found a way out. In 2018, shortly after the move to Colorado, She reconnected on Facebook with a school friend named Jeff Leibler. The first message was simple: "Hello, stranger." Over the next 15 months, they spoke 738 times, roughly 50 calls per day at its peak. They met in person in New Orleans, Michigan, Dallas, Florida, and Indianapolis. They made plans. They wanted to get married. They talked about living in Ecuador. Suzanne Morphew was not just unhappy. She was building an exit. She had also, around this time, purchased a spy pen, a device that looks like an ordinary pen, designed to capture audio, which she hid in the bedroom, hoping to catch Barry in something she could use. When investigators later found that pen, it contained no evidence of Barry's infidelity. What it held was audio of her own affair. The tool she had bought to expose him became the one piece of evidence that didn't help her case. On May 6, 2020, for days before Mother's Day, Suzanne texted Barry directly, "I'm done. I don't care what you're doing and haven't for years. We need to settle this civilly." Barry's response started romantic and then turned dark. He wrote that he was going to meet his savior, that this life on earth was just a grain of sand compared to eternity. Reading those messages now, they sound eerily like the words of someone anticipating a life-changing event. On the morning of May 10, 2020, the couple's two daughters were away on a camping trip that had been planned in advance. Suzanne was alone at home. Barry left before 5 a.m., telling anyone who asked that he had a big job waiting for him in Broomfield, 150 miles away. At 7 a.m., he texted Suzanne, "You awake? Happy Mother's Day. Love you." She didn't respond. The daughters sent messages too. She didn't respond to any of them. Let's stop right there for a second, because this is important. Barry left his house before dawn on Mother's Day for a job that his coworker would later confirm was not scheduled for that day. He went alone. The coworker said they were supposed to go together. When he arrived at the job site, he hadn't brought the equipment the job required. Security camera footage showed he spent less than 30 minutes there. Less than 30 minutes, then back in his truck. What he did next was not work. He made 5 stops at dumpsters across town. He changed his clothes multiple times between those stops. He checked into a hotel room that, when his coworker walked in that evening, smelled overwhelmingly of bleach. Hotel staff later confirmed they do not use bleach as a cleaning product. The pools were closed. It was COVID. There was no innocent source for that smell. Prosecutors argued this sequence was consistent with someone building a cover story, not a man finishing a job. That same afternoon, a neighbor called Barry, worried that Susan hadn't been seen or heard from all day. He told them to check the trails near the house. Police were called at 5:46 p.m. When officers arrived, they found Suzanne's car still in the garage. Her sunglasses and hydration pack were sitting untouched inside it. Her bicycle was found less than a mile from the house. The helmet was found 8 miles away from the bicycle, in a completely different direction. No blood, no clothing, no evidence of a struggle at either location. When Barry arrived on scene, he didn't stand back and wait to be spoken to. He immediately began offering theories. A mountain lion, he said. His wife may have been attacked by a mountain lion. He said it twice that first night, to officers who were working a missing person case with no evidence of violence anywhere at the scene. A mountain lion. He floated that theory within hours of his wife's disappearance, before anyone had asked him what might have happened. Inside the house, inside the laundry area, an investigator noticed something that didn't fit. Suzanne's padded cycling shorts were sitting in the laundry basket. The specific clothing she would have worn on a bike ride. If Suzanne had gone out for a ride that morning, why were her cycling shorts still at home? Up to this point, investigators had suspicions, but suspicions aren't enough to solve a murder. They needed something that couldn't lie. Digital records. Unlike people, they don't forget. Suzanne's phone logged its last activity on May 9th, the day before she disappeared, at 2:07 p.m. She had sent a selfie of herself sunbathing to Leibler. After 2:44 p.m., she responded to nothing. No messages, no calls. Silence. At the exact same window of time on May 9th, Barry's cell phone began logging rapid, erratic pings at multiple locations inside the family home. Investigators could not explain the pattern any other way. Barry's explanation for those pings was that he had been in the backyard hunting squirrels with a gun. A full sweep of the property found zero evidence of any hunting activity whatsoever. 3 minutes after those pings, Barry's phone went into airplane mode. It stayed there for nearly 8 hours. But Barry's phone wasn't the only thing recording his movements. The truck told its own story. Data from the vehicle showed it was moved at 3:25 a.m. on May 10th, before Barry claimed to have left for Broomfield. The truck was reversed 95 feet, repositioned closer to the house. A convenient position, investigators noted, for loading something heavy into the bed. Barry said he was asleep at that hour. His phone went into airplane mode again at 4:37 a.m. At 5:37 a.m., it came back online, with Barry already on his way to the job site. If the digital evidence raised questions, what investigators found inside the house raised even more. Inside the family dryer, investigators found a small plastic needle cap from a tranquilizer dart. Barry's first response to that was that he had no idea where it had come from. That story changed. He eventually admitted to having used a tranquilizer on a deer near the house in April 2020, weeks before Suzanne vanished. Before moving to Colorado, Barry had been a deer farmer in Indiana. He had hands-on experience with tranquilizer darts and syringes. He knew exactly how to use them, and he knew exactly what the appropriate dosage looked like on an animal the size of a person. By itself, none of this proved murder. But investigators believe the picture only became clear when they looked at Barry's behavior after Suzanne disappeared. In the months following Suzanne's disappearance, Barry Morphew did what grieving husbands do. He led public searches. He offered a $100,000 reward for information. He appeared on camera with a breaking voice, appealing to whoever might be holding his wife. Suzanne, if anybody out there can hear this and has you, please, I will do whatever it takes to bring you back home. He posted that video to Facebook 1 week after she vanished. It spread across the country. A devastated husband. A man consumed by hope and fear in equal measure. 2 months after posting it, Barry was living with another woman. In May 2021, nearly a year after Mother's Day, he was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The case at that point was entirely circumstantial. The cell data, the truck data, the dumpster stops, the dart needle cap, the holes in the alibi, the documented history of control and violence. Everything pointing in one direction. But there was no body. And without a body, the defense had exactly the argument it needed. Suzanne had simply left. She had walked away from the marriage, gone to her lover, disappeared by choice. Barry's behavior was suspicious. Yes, but suspicious is not a murder conviction. In April 2022, 1 day before the trial was scheduled to begin, prosecutor Linda Stanley moved to dismiss the charges. The reason was devastating. Stanley had failed to turn over evidence to the defense, specifically DNA results from Suzanne's vehicle that pointed to 2 unidentified male profiles. A Brady violation. In American law, prosecutors are required to hand over evidence that might help the defense. Stanley hadn't. Beyond the Brady violation, she had given detailed interviews while the case was still pending, a staggering lapse in prosecutorial judgment. She had also opened a formal investigation against the presiding judge for rulings that had gone against her. Linda Stanley was subsequently disbarred. The charges were dropped. Barry Morphew walked out of that courthouse smiling, both daughters at his side, and went straight to Good Morning America to tell America he had been vindicated. His daughters sat beside him and said they had never, not for a single moment, doubted their father's innocence. They said they knew him better than anyone. In 2023, Barry and his daughters filed a $15 million civil lawsuit against Chaffee County, the Sheriff's Department, Linda Stanley, and various investigators, alleging reckless investigation, fabricated evidence, and wrongful prosecution. Then Barry relocated to Arizona and carried on. He was free. The case was over. He had won, or so he thought. For nearly a year, that seemed to be the end of the story. Then a search team working on an entirely different missing person case made a discovery that changed everything. On September 22, 2023, 3 years and 4 months after Suzanne Morphew vanished, a search team working a completely unrelated missing persons case in Moffat County, Colorado, found bones in an open sagebrush field. Remote terrain, 60 miles from Salida. A shallow depression in the earth that had been excavated and then disturbed. 5 days later, forensic analysis confirmed the remains were Suzanne Morphew. Now remember the bleach smell in that hotel room on May 10, 2020. Most of the bones were significantly bleached. Not by time, not by weather, forensically bleached. Chemically, the same process used to destroy biological material. Alongside the bones, a chemotherapy port, the device implanted in cancer patients' bodies to receive intravenous treatment, still in place in the remains. Still there, years later, confirming beyond any forensic doubt who these bones belonged to. Also with the remains, cycling clothes Suzanne wore regularly. But the cycling clothes had a problem. The forensic anthropologist's report concluded that the clothing showed no signs of decomposition consistent with being worn at the time of death. What that means, Suzanne was not wearing those clothes when she died. Investigators believe the clothing may have been placed on the remains after death. Someone placed cycling clothes on a body that had already decomposed, possibly to suggest she had died during a bike ride. The location itself told investigators the body had been moved more than once. This was not the original site. Someone had gone back. Someone had moved her. And then, when investigators were finally standing in that sagebrush field with a forensic report in their hands, the most important finding came back from the toxicology analysis. Inside Suzanne Morphew's bones, investigators found a specific combination of 3 substances: butorphanol, azapirone, and medetomidine. Combined, these 3 drugs form what is known in veterinary medicine as BAM. It is used to sedate large animals during veterinary procedures or transport. In 2020, BAM was manufactured by a single company in the United States. It was available only by veterinary prescription. You could not walk into a pharmacy and buy it. You could not order it online. It required a professional relationship with a licensed veterinary supplier. Investigators pulled the prescription records for the entire region. They documented every individual or entity that had legally acquired BM in that area between 2017 and 2020. In capital letters in the prosecution filing, the conclusion reads, "Ultimately, prescription records show that when Suzanne Morphew disappeared, only one private citizen in that entire area of Colorado had access to BM. Barry Morphew, the man who had been a deer farmer, who knew how to load a tranquilizer dart, who had checked into a hotel room that smelled of bleach on the day his wife was reported missing. That man was the only private citizen in the region with access to the drug found in his dead wife's bones." In June 2025, a Colorado grand jury indicted Barry Morphew on first-degree murder. 2 days later, he was arrested in Arizona and extradited back to Colorado. When he walked into the courtroom for his bond hearing, he looked out at the gallery, found one of his daughters sitting in the crowd, and smiled broadly at her. The same smile. 3 years after the first case collapsed, 2 years after his wife's bones were identified in a field 60 miles from their home, and Barry Morphew walked into a courtroom and smiled at his daughter like he was arriving at a school play. Suzanne's brother submitted a written statement to the court for that hearing. He wrote that he had spent many nights lying awake thinking about his sister's final minutes. He wrote about the life she had been trying to build, the affair, the plans for Ecuador, the exit strategy she had been carefully constructing. He said she had asked herself, as she did throughout her life, "What was I thinking?" Barry's defense responded to the indictment with a statement to CBS Colorado. Once again, The government is allowing its predetermined conclusion to guide the search for evidence. Barry maintains his innocence. The case, his defense said, had not changed. But the case had changed completely. In 2021, it was circumstantial. The defense could argue Suzanne had walked away. There was room for reasonable doubt. In 2025, there is a body with a confirmed cause of death ruled a homicide. There is BAM in the bones. There is documentation establishing that Barry Morphew was the only private citizen in that region of Colorado with access to that substance. The story that Suzanne simply left, that she was alive somewhere with her lover, is gone. It cannot be told anymore. The bones ended it. Bail was set at $3 million cash. Barry's defense negotiated conditions that allowed him to use property as collateral and be released on electronic monitoring. A GPS ankle bracelet, monthly reports to the court, banned from leaving Colorado, and banned from changing his name during proceedings. The trial of Barry Morphew for the first-degree murder of Suzanne Morphew is scheduled to begin on October 13, 2026. Chief Judge Amanda Hopkins estimates it will run approximately 6 weeks, through the end of November. If convicted, Barry Morphew faces the mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. This time, the prosecution has something it didn't have before: Suzanne's remains, toxicology findings, and evidence that will be tested before a jury. The smiling man who walked out of a courthouse in 2022 believing he had committed the perfect crime is going to sit in a courtroom this October and watch a jury hear about what was found in a sagebrush field 60 miles from the house, where his wife used to keep a notebook. If you found this story touching, please share and subscribe if you haven't. It helps us continue telling stories that deserve to be heard. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.